I see submission 20-1, 20-2, 20-2, and 20-4. Can you tell, ladies and gentlemen of the jury, what examination was performed in those areas?
Sure. On this particular item, as with the previous items, I examined the item for the potential visual examination to see if there was any stains that could potentially be blood, which I did test, in addition to collecting other samples from other areas of interest, which included what we at the time referred to as touch DNA, as well as wearer DNA. So sample 20-1 was what we refer to as a touch DNA sample, which was collected on all the unstained areas of the exterior of the shoe. 20-2 was a sample collected from the interior of the shoe, avoiding any unstained areas as well, which I did refer to as the wearer type sample. And 20-4 was a stain that had the appearance of blood, which I tested with a presumptive test for blood, which yielded positive results.
And just for clarification on this exhibit, that would be on the top picture of the shoe, on the, what would be the left toe area of the shoe?
Yes.
And with regards to State's Exhibit 138, did you perform an examination on submission 20-30?
Yep.
Or 20-3, excuse me.
Yep. 20-3 was a sample of a stain that had blood-like appearance to it that I also tested with the presumptive test for blood, which yielded positive result.
And again, once you perform these examinations, you sent your swabbings off to DNA?
I did. Yes.
I'm going to show you what's been marked as State's Exhibit 139. This would be submission number 26. Again, barcode associated with the lab.
Yes.
And with regards to this piece of evidence, showing you Exhibit 140, this piece of evidence referred to by the lab exhibit, this is submission number 26. Can you tell the ladies and gentlemen of the jury what examinations, if any, were performed in relation to this exhibit?
So this particular submission contained a pair of shoes or sneakers. I was not the original examiner of this particular item, but after reviewing the case information and the notes that were taken by this examiner and looking through her photographs, I was able to surmise that there was a pair of shoes here in which she did collect some samples from, some of which were tested, some of which included testing of stains that had a blood-like appearance with our presumptive test for blood. Yeah.
Now, I want to direct your attention to (26-1), which refers to tissue-like material.
Yes.
What examination was performed on that tissue-like material?
So that tissue-like material was eventually subitemized as 26-1-1 as it was collected, and it was tested with the presumptive test for blood, which yielded a positive result.
And again, when we're referring to a pair of sneakers here, it's 26-1, 26-2 would be the left sneaker or the right sneaker?
Correct.
And with regards to what looks like the 26-1 I think this is just 26-1. Do you know what examination was performed on that particular area of the sneaker?
In that particular area, the presumptive test for blood was conducted, and the examiner yielded a positive result.
There was also 26-1-2. Is that the blood sample taken from the tissue-like material?
The tissue-like material is 26-1-1.
And can you tell us about 26-1-2?
That was collected from I believe, the top toe area, or the front of the shoe. It might be shown on a different photograph. I'm not sure.
Let me show you states 141. Okay. I apologize. 141. Pointing to the okay, 26-2-1. Is that the area we're referring to?
Is not. That's actually from the second sneaker. But on the right sneaker, which is what is displayed here, there was a stain that had a blood-like appearance that the examiner tested with the presumptive test for blood, which yielded a positive result.
So with regards to this particular piece of this evidence, 141, 26-2-1, this is the right sneaker, correct?
That's correct.
And with regards to this particular submission, what examination was performed and what results were yielded, if any?
On 26-2-1?
Yes.
It was positive for the presumptive test for blood.
Show you what's marked as State's Exhibit 142. This would be referred to as submission number 35. Did you perform an examination on submission number 35?
I did, yes.
And submission number 35 is what?
It contained a white diaper pail.
And with regards to States 143, is this the white diaper pail that you're referring to?
Yes, that does look like it, but that's not a photograph that I took.
But do you see the lab number affixed to the packaging?
I do, yes.
So in regards to this particular piece of evidence, again, another picture of States 144. Can you tell us about this picture, 144? Why was this picture taken?
This picture was taken to show the overall appearance of the item as I received it out of the package.
And States 145. Did you perform any testing for blood-like substance on this submission? I see submission 35-1. Can you tell us about that?
Yes. Submission 35, which itself is the diaper pail, did contain or have blood-like staining on it. I did perform the presumptive test for blood on the particular stain that's displayed in the photo, and it was designated later as 35-1, which is the sample that I collected for DNA testing.
Now, were there any other substances taken off of this submission?
There were other samples that were collected, yes.
Do you know whether or not, in addition to your blood testing on this submission, was it tested for any latent prints?
It was.
I'm going to show you what's been marked as State's Exhibit 147. Would this be a picture of the same piece of evidence taken after it was submitted for latent prints?
Yes.
Okay. And in relation to submission 35-3, can you tell us, did you perform an examination on 35-3 prior to it going to latent prints?
Prior, no. I did an overall examination on the item to determine whether or not potential blood stains could be collected. However, we try to limit how much we collect from an item before it goes through latent prints, just because we don't want to interfere with the exam that they might be conducting on the item.
So, in fact, in this particular piece of evidence, you collected some evidentiary items with regards to blood-like substances after the fact?
That's correct.
Okay. And 35-3, did you perform a blood-like substance test on a presumptive test on 35-3?
I did,
And,
yes.
did it yield? What did it yield?
It yielded a positive result for the potential presence of blood, and it was an area. The reason why I honed in on this particular area was because it was an area that was specifically identified by the latent print unit as potentially having some friction-ridge detail, which I can't talk in lengths about. But it was an item or an area that they pointed out to me specifically as having significance to them, so I ended up collecting it myself.
And I want to direct your attention to State Exhibit 146. Submission 35-4, which is on the top picture. 35-4 on the right side would be the bottom of the diaper pail, and 35-5 would be the overall, I guess, side view of the diaper pail. Can you tell us, did you perform any examinations as it relates to those two areas of that piece of evidence?
Yes, both 35-4 and 35-5 were areas that I collected that could potentially be used as a touch sample. 35-4 from the bottom and 35-5 from the main body of the item in an attempt to avoid any areas that appeared to be stained.
And when you were done with this particular piece of evidence, what did you do with all of your swabbings and examination items after you were done?
So any of the samples I collected were put into sterile labeled tubes that were then transferred to a secure freezer storage location so that the person who is doing the DNA testing can retrieve it from there. The items themselves were placed back into the original packaging in which they were received. They were securely sealed, and they were brought to the laboratory's evidence receiving unit with the intention of those items eventually getting returned to the agency who submitted them.
When the lab receives evidence from an outside agency, the barcode is placed on each package by the lab?
Yes.
And will the lab receive any type of evidence from an outside agency if the evidence is not properly sealed?
Typically not. Typically, our evidence receiving unit will not allow evidence in if there is a question of the integrity of the packaging.
That's all I have. No further questions, Your Honor. Thank you.
All right, Attorney Durso, thank you. Attorney Gavin, any cross?
Thank you, Your Honor. Hi, Ms. Nelson.
Hello.
How you doing?
I'm okay, thanks. How are you?
I'm doing great. Thanks for being here with us.
Of course.
I'm just going to run through some stuff with you.
Sure.
Okay. We met earlier today.
We did.
Correct? All right, great. So you're a forensic science examiner too, correct?
Yes.
All right, terrific. And I just want to run through the protocol, what happens with the evidence. It comes into the lab from various agencies, correct?
Correct.
And that could be things like local law enforcement, correct?
Correct.
The state police?
Correct.
Or other agencies?
Absolutely. Yes.
So the first thing I want to establish with you is where the evidence is collected, how it's collected, the manner in which it's collected. That has nothing to do with the Division of Scientific Services. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Right? So stuff comes in for testing purposes, but you're not involved in the integrity of how it was collected.
That's correct.
Terrific. Okay. And then, evidence is received by one department in the lab. Is that correct?
That's correct.
And for example, if something came in and the seal was broke or the evidence submission envelope was somehow tampered with, that would potentially be rejected by the lab, correct?
It could potentially be, yes.
Yeah, and it would be returned to the agency.
Yes, ideally, yes.
Okay, and then just so I understand, so evidence comes in, from example, this case from the Ansonia Police Department. It was submitted and received, and evidence can go to different departments within the Division of Scientific Services. Is that correct?
Yes.
Right? And your division, your department within the division is the biology department.
That's correct.
right? And you also testified about other departments like the DNA department, correct?
Yes.
And latent fingerprints,
Yes.
and there are other departments as well.
There are.
correct?
Yes.
Okay, terrific. So the biology department, you conduct, I think you said serological testing, is that correct?
Yes.
Okay, and serological testing is a determination of the items that are submitted if they have the potential to contain bodily fluids or other biological material, is that correct?
We really only test for the presence of body fluids, and we can collect samples which we may assume might have other biological materials such as skin cells, which we can't test for, but we can collect samples from for DNA testing.
Terrific. And all the departments work together, correct? DNA would work with biology, which would work with latent prints, for example.
We're pretty intertwined. Yeah.
Right. I know that there's separate departments and separate examinations are done within those departments, but you have no problem contacting a colleague in one of the other departments if you had a question.
Absolutely.
Sure. Okay, terrific. And now let's talk about biology and see if I understand this correctly. When an item is submitted, is there a visual examination that occurs?
Yes.
Okay, and just tell us, how do you do a visual examination?
So visual examination what we're basically looking for will depend on the circumstances of the case. So because in this particular instance, I knew that there was a person who may have been bleeding at the scene, I'll make sure that upon my visual examination, I'm looking for any stains that might be blood-like, which will then help direct me with the rest of my exam. The nature of that item might also help me determine what I'm going to do with that item. Some of the items you saw, samples were collected from other areas that were not deemed as blood-like, and knowing what the item is and where it may have been collected from and what it may have originated from may help me determine what type of samples to collect as I'm going forward.
Terrific. And when you do a visual examination, you can do that under ambient light, for example. The normal lighting in the room is one way to go ahead and analyze things,
Yes.
correct?
Yep.
And then do you also use alternative light sources to go ahead and do an analysis?
We can, yes.
Tell us in your own words how that works.
So if there's evidence that we're looking for body fluids such as semen or saliva, which is not always visible with the naked eye, we do have the ability to put those items of evidence under an alternate light source to help visualize what we can't otherwise see without the aid of that light source.
So if you have enhanced lighting, it may assist you in your ability to analyze the submission.
Yes.
Okay, terrific. Now, you told us that you do a variety of tests, including blood tests. Is that correct?
Yes.
Okay. And then do you also test for things like spermatozoa?
We do.
Okay. And saliva?
We do.
And seminal fluid?
Yes.
Right? And urine?
Not anymore.
Why not?
It was a test that we weren't doing very often, so it was an executive decision in management that we were no longer going to provide those services.
Okay, all right. So the tests that are done, I take it that after the tests that are done, there are results that are generated,
Yes.
right? Okay, all right. And so the analyst goes ahead, observes, does a examination, and there are different results that can come as a consequence of the examination, correct?
Yes.
Sure. And what's a positive result?
A positive result would be an interpretation that a particular body fluid might be present there, and it usually is the result of a visual observation that I'm making with that test, which most often is like a color change reaction that I can deem something positive with.
Terrific. And what would a negative result be?
Oftentimes, to piggyback what I just said, if it's a color change reaction type of test, if no color change is observed, then I can call it a negative.
And how about an inconclusive result?
Inconclusive is somewhere in between. Oftentimes, we will call it inconclusive if we feel like the substrate in which the stain is tested on is interfering with the test and is not allowing us to give a fair and accurate result. We will call it inconclusive so that we're not one way or the other saying whether that particular body fluid was present or not.
Now, how about a failed test?
A failed test is actually a failure of the test itself. It doesn't really have much to do with the evidence. When we run controls prior to doing our testing, that will usually eliminate the chance that will happen. It can happen occasionally, but all the tests that we do are quality control tested before we use them to greatly decrease the chances of a failed test happening.
Do you ever have a submission that's not suitable for testing?
It has happened, yes.
And could you give us an example of that?
So, for example, if we have a heavily stained item that is heavily stained with what we perceive might be blood, but we want to test it for semen, sometimes because of that heavy staining of that blood there, it might mask any results that we might be trying to get with the semen testing that we're doing. So we might call it unsuitable and then go to a different test that may not have that blood-like staining be an issue for. That makes sense.
After the analyst goes ahead and does their analysis, can reports be generated in regard to their findings?
Yes.
Okay. Now, talk about just this case here, and I know you're very experienced. I understand that you've written a lot of reports. But just in this case, you recall authoring a report on December 5th, 2019.
I think it was the 6th.
Could
I refer? Yeah, if you don't mind. Just want to
Yeah,
make sure.
I don't have any objection if you refer to that. Or I can show it to you if you like.
Let's see. Apologize, where is it here?
I have my copy here.
Goodness, yeah. This is so much
Let me
paperwork.
give you my copy.
Okay, thank you.
Your Honor, may I approach?
Certainly.
The date is not too important.
Oh, okay, I just want to make sure that I had it straight.
We want to be accurate.
Okay. December 10th is actually the date of the report. Yeah,
Okay, great. And there were two reports that you issued.
I did, yes.
And I'm going to show you the second report.
Okay. And that was January 6th of 2020.
Terrific.
Yep.
Okay, thank you.
Yep.
Now, I want to talk to you a little bit about the blood tests that were done in this case on the items that were submitted. And we just saw about 100 pictures that we went through, and I'm not going to go through all of those pictures with you. But I thought I heard you testify that the tests that were done on the BLS, blood-like stains, okay, was a presumptive test.
Yes.
Is that correct?
That's correct.
All right, and that's that Castle-Meyer test, correct?
It is.
Okay, so let's just see if we can go through slowly here. The Castle-Meyer presumptive test has some severe limitations to it too, doesn't it?
It does have a couple, yes.
Yeah, okay. So the first thing that the Castle-Meyer test does, it can't tell the difference between human blood or animal blood. Is that correct?
That is correct.
All right. Now, and sometimes what happens with the Castle-Meyer test is that there can be false positives from oxidizing agents. Is that correct?
It is correct.
Could you explain that? I can. Could you explain to the jury what a false positive is?
So basically, it would be that the test would give a positive result for something other than blood. And there are substances, as was mentioned, that can oxidize or cause the same reaction in the test as blood would if it were present.
Okay. So all of the testing that you did in this case, all of those items that were introduced here, you can't tell us where the origin of any of those items were. Is that correct?
That's correct.
You don't know where any of these blood stains came from what person it came from,
Correct.
right? You can't identify on a shoe or a book or a piece of cloth or a piece of clothing whether it came from any unique individual,
I cannot.
right? It's just the presumptive test that the reagent action occurs, and you say there's a presumption, a positive result to that presumptive test.
That's correct.
Okay. One of the submissions were the puzzles and the books, okay? And I can get the photo if you want. But it seemed like they were all packaged together. And what I want to ask you is, when you received the submissions, so would every one of those books that we saw, would they have been packaged individually, or would it have been in a collective evidence submission?
In this particular case, they were all commingling within the package that was received.
Okay, so let's just talk about that for a second. Can there be situations where there are cross-contamination and transfer when items are commingled?
Yeah, I mean, contamination is a strong word. However, I can't say anything about contamination as that's more of a DNA, something that they could explain because I can't detect contamination, but there could be cross, I guess, transfer, rubbing off of one item to another with the blood or blood-like substance, yes.
So if the items are bundled together, and I'm going to remove contamination because you don't seem comfortable with that word, but I'm going to use the word transfer. Is that clear?
That's fine, yes.
Okay, so if I have a book over here and a puzzle over here, and the puzzle has blood on it, and we put it together with the book, there can be transfer from the puzzle onto the book, and by the time the analyst gets it, you don't know where it came from.
That's true.
Right? So the only thing you could do is observe and analyze what's in front of you, not knowing the source or how it was transferred to the lab for analysis.
That's true, yes.
I really appreciate your time. Thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you.
Attorney Jerson?
No further questions for this witness, Your Honor.
Okay, thank you. All right, thank you. You may
Thank
sit
you.
down.
Thank you.
Please watch your step. All right, so ladies and gentlemen of the jury, we are going to take our afternoon recess.